Good evening, everyone. It's cold. It's raining. It's not been a particularly great night of football. Pretty rank game of football. Pretty rank performance from Norwich City, and pretty rank weather to top it off at the John Smith Stadium as well. Norwich City have drawn with Huddersfield Town 1-1 here this evening in a game that maybe can be best described as being one of those games of two halves, if you wanted to cliche it. But actually, I think I expressed this a little bit on Sunday, but I had some fears about what potentially this game could be tonight in terms of it being potentially very difficult, potentially a little bit of a banana skin, more challenging than maybe it reflected on paper. And I think probably my fears in that regard have come true. I don't want to sound wise after the event, but the combination of all of those factors, Neil Warnock here, of course, a side that's struggling against relegation, off-field woes as well, that kind of blends the togetherness. But actually, this was a game where Norwich City didn't show enough quality to win the game of football. And actually, reflecting on Huddersfield's performance in particular in the first half, that is particularly disappointing given the lack of quality that they displayed. So let's start with the game then. David Wagner made a couple of changes. Teemu Pukki dropped out, Josh Sargent came in, Adam Idah remained on the left. Jakob Sørensen came in, Marquinhos came in for Onel Hernandez, who's injured. So a few changes made in midfield and forward areas. He stuck with the same back four. I think, as has been the case, there were some murmurs that potentially there'd be a change in that area pre-game, but that obviously was proven not to be the case. And I think there may be some issues around Ben Gibson before the game as well, but he obviously came through all the relevant tests and all the relevant bits because he started here this evening, and Norwich City started in it relatively well. They had plenty of possession, they were dominant. I think that first half performance from Huddersfield is probably as bad a performance as I've seen this season from any side, which, obviously you put that in the context of the overall result, and it's not particularly brilliant in terms of Norwich City and from a Norwich City perspective, but it didn't really look like they had an idea on the ball. They couldn't string five passes together, but also when they went long, they didn't have the runners and the support and the shape and the structure to deal with that necessarily. And so that made it really not kind of easy for Norwich City. They were going through the gears a little bit. They were keeping possession there, and a lot of joy down this left side below me, which is actually where the first goal came from. And again, I spoke on Sunday a little bit about how I feared slightly that Norwich have been running a little bit hot and how perhaps the goals they've been scoring haven't been necessarily the most sustainable. And I feel slowly like those fears are gradually increasing. We saw it again here tonight. They didn't really construct much. I'm struggling to think of a real save that the Huddersfield Town goalkeeper had to make, apart from the one from Christoph Solis in the second half. But the first half, Norwich were comfortable, is probably the word I would use, not impressive. And I think the game probably panned out in a way that was more easily attributed to what Huddersfield Town showed in their own performance, rather than what Norwich City showed in theirs. I didn't feel the levels were anywhere near where they needed to be, but in reality they didn't need to be because of the quality or lack of quality of the opponent that they were facing. The goal they scored was a really good bit of quality. Kenny McLean sent Adam Idah away, and I was really pleased for Adam Idah actually, because he's had to endure a lot of criticism. David Wagner's obviously shown some faith in him. It was a really good shift actually onto the right foot, and just lifts his head at the perfect moment to spot Gabi Sarra's run. When perhaps the more natural ball, if you're playing with your head down, is just to clip it into an area. This was a brilliantly weighted pass into Gabi Sarra's path, and an excellent sort of deep run again to volley past the goalkeeper and into the back of the net. And from there, probably all of us and everyone in this stadium probably felt that this was only going to go one way, and Norwich City would flex their muscles, work their way through the gears, they'd score a few more goals, we'd all go home, it would be and the game would follow that pattern. But I don't know whether it was fatigue, complacency, whether the adversity of the injuries radically shifted it. They obviously lost Ben Gibson and Adam Idah after that first goal. Ben Gibson looks to be a suspected hamstring injury. That's certainly what he indicated to David Wagner when he came off the pitch. Adam Idah looked to be more of an ankle injury. And that disrupted their rhythm and their flow a little bit and affected their build-up to an extent as well, because they were getting a lot of joy down that left-hand side. Teemu Pukki came on that left, and he's not a wide player by any stretch of the imagination. I really don't get sort of this idea that maybe if Teemu Pukki was shoehorned into that area or behind the striker, he would somehow be more effective. He's effective because of his intelligent runs and how he creates space and how he runs off defenders. That's, for me, better in the central striker role, but that's another debate for a different day. And yeah, I mean, Huddersfield were booed off. Norwich would have been okay with their performance. I don't think they'd have been absolutely delighted with it. They wouldn't have been absolutely gutted with it either. I think it was probably a fair reflection of the game. Norwich displayed one bit of quality. Huddersfield didn't have any. And I have to say, if it was a better quality of team, I feel in that first half, then this game would have been out of sight by half time. But Norwich didn't raise their levels to the levels that they needed to. And again, that could be all down to all sorts of reasons. You could talk about mentality, you can talk about complacency, you can talk about fatigue, you can throw them all in there, dissect them however you want. But they are there, and all of them I felt were present to a degree. There was a real kind of lethargy about Norwich City and the way they move the ball, and there's not a lot of purpose. And it was a really stodgy attacking performance again, and it's a problem that's persisted all season. And we saw it. And then the second half, Huddersfield came out and were a little bit different. They changed their structure. They actually, out of possession, kind of dropped back to a 5 at points. Sometimes it was a 6. And it was about turning the ball over and getting runners kind of off central strikers. And they did that and were effective in that and limited the space and defended pretty adequately, really, against not much really for to offer, apart from late on when Christos Solis had his shot on goal. Temi Pukki had a couple of half chances from the edge of the box. Gabriel Sara had a couple of shots from range as well. But again, I'm struggling to recall Vlasic in their goal really making a proper save. He didn't, to be honest, and that's a damning indictment on Norwich City's attacking play and what they weren't able to do this evening. They weren't able to find those moments of inspiration or those different dynamics or those combinations that allowed them to cut down a team who sat bottom of the league. So again, you find yourself probably asking more probing questions about the squad and where they're at and the cycles and all of this. And I said on Sunday, you don't necessarily want to bounce between results, but this is a really disappointing result. In many ways, more disappointing than Sunday. But in many ways, I'm stood here not surprised because of what this group is and what they've shown they are this season. That inconsistent streak, that inability to meet adversity head on. And the fact of the matter is this really. Actually, I'll come to that later. But let's talk about the goal first. Okay, it's a bit fortunate. Gabi Sara looks to play a pass through. Josh Karoma just gets on the end of it and almost clears the ball into the path of Martin Magborn. Norwich's defensive structure, because they are in possession and Grant Hanley's on the right wing, just so they have an option to kind of switch the play. Kenny McLean is occupying that more central role, and again, it just gives them an out basically if they're trying to shift the play, and that's why it's so wide. And the nature, as I've said loads of times, the nature of this philosophy is when it goes wrong, it's going to look pretty bad, and I think that's what we saw with the goal. Just didn't respond quick enough. One ball over. Martin Magborn has the space of Kirklees to put the ball over Angus Gunn. He actually misses that chance, and how's your luck? It comes off Grant Hanley and into the back of the net. It's an own goal. But actually, in the period before that, Norwich let Huddersfield back into the game. They gave them space and encouragement. They gave this crowd encouragement, which has been pretty quiet, and actually had been turning on their players quite a lot throughout the first half. And that's kind of the position that Norwich wanted to be in. And what you want when you're 1-0 up at this place, just manage the game a little bit better. Just manage it a bit better. Show a bit of composure. Show a bit of maturity in your performance. Just manage it. Settle it down. Ride the waves that we all saw was going to come. They didn't do that. They dangled the carrot for Huddersfield, who gleefully took it. And they were much improved in the second half. They couldn't be much worse, to be honest. And it took them a while to get going. But again, because Norwich lacked that cutting edge, that ruthlessness in the final third, in the first half, it gave them they were dangling a bigger carrot essentially, and Huddersfield were happy to take the opportunity. And really, they've had one chance. I think there was a shot actually later on from Rudini, and there was a free kick from Magborn, but one real clear-cut chance. And no, actually, I tell a lie, they had one towards the end as well, but it fell to Hellick on the counter-attack, which would have won this game really. And yeah, look, there's an argument that Norwich's squad is a bit stretched at the moment, and there are injuries at the moment. There's a bit of adversity and all of this, but actually the depth of their squad is there, the quality of their squad is there. They should be coming to places like this and winning, and that's not complacency. That is spoken with the aspiration of a team that wants to get into the top 6 in the Championship. And this was always going to be tough, but it was always going to be a character test. And I've said this quite a few times this season, but I think a good team and a team that is capable of getting out of this division gets through that game. And this probably brings me on to my overarching point, really. And again, I don't want to get too reactive, and I don't want to bounce up and down. I've continuously said on podcasts, I've written it as well, that I feel this group will fall just short. And I've said that during the high sort of winning run that Norwich City had a few weeks ago, and I've said it after back-to-back defeats and obviously the defeat and the draw here. But I've seen one game this season where I've watched Norwich City and thought, yeah, that's a side that could finish in the top six. One game, and that was Millwall away a couple of weeks ago. Beyond that, I'm really struggling to think of any time this season I've watched this Norwich City side and felt they had the quality, the fluency, the ability, the answers to problems that would allow them to push into the top six. And I don't see that. It's 4 points at this moment in time. Obviously a long way to go. April's a monumental month. They've got Sheffield United, who are in a horrid run of form after the international break. Blackburn, Middlesbrough as well. Wins in those games transform the outlook of it. But at this moment in time, they are going to have to conjure up something pretty special to change what this group is. So this group has in it, and it's just innate in this group. It's a characteristic that seemingly is unavoidable, and two coaches have had a go to try and coach it out of them. Both so far haven't been able to do that. It's this inconsistency of performance, this sluggishness that they display, and that is probably ultimately why I fear and I feel they are going to fall just short this season of the top six. Look, David Wagner will use the conversation of injuries. Obviously, Marquinhos got sent off as well. It's not a red card as far as I'm concerned. I know Josh Ruffles has ended up with blood on his face, and it maybe looks quite bad, but Marquinhos, there's no movement in the elbow. There's no sort of swinging of the elbow, flailing of the elbow. The elbow's not high. It's not low. He's not kind of let down. He's contested for a header. His arm is actually flat as he makes contact with Ruffles' face. There's contact, absolutely. But I don't think it's a red card. I think maybe a yellow. I don't think there's a high enough threshold there, in my opinion, for it to be violent conduct. And so I think the referee has looked rightly at the state of the player's face. He's gone off the reactions of the Huddersfield coaching bench, of the players as well, and he's been very quick to produce a red card. And I think if he watches it back with hindsight, maybe he feels that was strong punishment for what it was. Whether the mistake is that big that it will allow Norwich to overturn it, I don't know. Whether they've even got enough time to overturn it before Stoke, I don't know. I think they would look to appeal. I think they should look to appeal because I don't think it's a red card. So it'll be interesting to see how that one transpires. Obviously, Adam Ida limped out as well. Onel Hernandez is out injured as well. He's going to miss the Stoke game. John Rowe, who was coming back, felt his hamstring in the under-21s game that he featured in on Monday. He's unavailable as well. Norwich are therefore going to have to get some under-21s up to what is now a little base in the north that they're keeping for a few days between these games to get players into the squad. So it is stretched, and there is an argument. Look, 3 games in 6 days is a high load. It's difficult to recover from, but equally Norwich have enough quality and enough options in their squad, I feel, to ensure that they come through tests like this. And ultimately tonight they didn't, and that is really, really frustrating, because I felt, looking at this block of 2 games, and it's still possible, but it was going to need to be 4 points to keep their playoff aspirations alive and to keep them within touching distance. They're 4 points from Millwall now. Stoke are in a really good run of form. They should have beaten Middlesbrough last night, I felt. They've beaten Blackburn. They've beaten Sunderland as well, 5-1. They're in a really good way. They're going to press Norwich hard. It's going to be a game. It's going to be uncomfortable. You've got the Alex Neil factor as well. All of that makes it feel like a really difficult clash. And in many ways, probably a little bit different to this game tonight, because I think Norwich, given their injuries, I think David Wagner will try and cast them as the underdogs. It'll be interesting to see how that sort of transpires in reality. I think Stoke will want to play without the ball. They'll allow Norwich to have it, but will want to press high and engage them high. I think Neil's teams are very good at doing that. So a potentially difficult one on Saturday as well. And if Norwich don't get 3 points out of that, it is going to be very difficult heading into an international break to have much optimism that they're going to have the capabilities to navigate the rest of the season and finish it in the top 6. And that is the concern, I think, of fans. They just haven't seen enough evidence from this group that they're capable of doing it. And that is and like I said, I've seen one game where I've really felt it, and even that wasn't they're going to finish in the top 6. That was okay, yeah, they might do it. They might, and that's as kind of close as I feel I've got this year to feeling that Norwich will finish in the top 6. So something that narrative has to change. They can only do that through performances and results, and it's going to be really interesting to see at the weekend how it all transpires and how it all works and how the team figures out as well. As I said, Norwich is staying in the north for the next couple of days. A lot of that will be recovery based, but they didn't want to go back to Norwich, get back late tonight, and then essentially have one training session tomorrow before going up on Friday. So they've got a northern base that they're going to use before that game on Saturday against Stoke. We're staying tonight and then going back tomorrow and then coming back up. So that's going to be interesting. And we'll see what Saturday brings from this kind of Norwich City side that's so multifaceted, so unreliable. Yeah, it's going to be a testing game. But I'm going to sign off because I can't feel my feet anymore. Plenty more analysis and reaction over at pinken.com. I spoke to Gabby Sarah. There's some quotes from him up in the morning as well. Get a trial for Pinken Plus if you get to do that, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evenings. It's bitterly cold. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.